The Manhattan sidewalk bustled with the usual afternoon crowd, business people hurrying between meetings, tourists stopping to take photos, delivery workers weaving through it all. Harrison Webb walked among them, his navy suit tailored perfectly, his dark hair styled with precision. His 4-year-old daughter Grace walked beside him, her small hand in his, wearing a blue cardigan over a flowered dress, a pink bow in her blonde curls. At 37, Harrison had built a financial consulting firm worth millions. He worked long hours, traveled frequently, and gave Grace everything money could buy. But he knew, deep down, that he was still learning to be the father she deserved after losing her mother. His wife, Caroline, had died in childbirth with Grace. The grief had nearly destroyed Harrison. For months, he'd barely functioned, relying on nannies and his sister to care for the baby while he worked obsessively, burying his pain in spreadsheets and conference calls. But Grace had slowly pulled him back to life. Her first smile, her first steps, her first word, Dada, had reminded him that he still had something precious to live for. Now, 4 years later, they had their routines. Saturday afternoons meant lunch at their favorite cafe, then a walk through the city before heading home. It was their special time together, just the two of them. They were passing a restaurant with a black awning when Grace suddenly stopped, her hand tightening around Harrison's. "Daddy, look," she said, her voice small and serious. Harrison followed her gaze. A boy sat on the ground near the restaurant entrance, perhaps 7 or 8 years old. His dark hair was messy, his face smudged with dirt, his clothes worn and too large. He held a piece of bread, eating it slowly, carefully, as if it might be his only meal. "Can we help him?" Grace asked, tugging on Harrison's hand. Harrison felt the familiar discomfort. He donated to charities, wrote large checks to homeless shelters. But face-to-face encounters were harder. What could he really do for one child on a crowded street? "Grace, there are people who help children like him. Organizations." "But he's here now," Grace said with the simple logic of childhood. "And we're here now." She pulled free of Harrison's hand and walked directly to the boy. Harrison followed quickly, protective instincts kicking in. Grace stood in front of the boy, studying him with solemn eyes. The boy looked up at her, wary but not aggressive. Up close, Harrison could see he was thin, too thin, with dark eyes that held too much knowledge for his age. "Hi," Grace said. "What's your name?" The boy hesitated. "Alex." "I'm Grace, that's my daddy." She pointed at Harrison.
"Are you hungry?"
"We just had lunch." "We could get you more food." The boy's eyes flicked to Harrison, assessing, calculating the risks of accepting help from strangers. "It's okay," Harrison said gently, kneeling down to the boy's level. "We'd be happy to get you something to eat." "No strings attached." Alex nodded slowly. "Okay." They went back into the restaurant. The maitre d' looked uncomfortable at the sight of the street child, but Harrison's expression left no room for objection. They sat at a corner table and Harrison ordered soup, a sandwich, and a hot chocolate for Alex. The boy ate carefully, with surprising manners, despite his circumstances. Grace watched him intently, barely touching her own cookie. "Where do you live?" Harrison asked carefully. "Around," Alex said vaguely. "Different places. What about your parents?" The boy's face closed off. "My mom died. I never knew my dad." Harrison felt a pang in his chest. "I'm sorry. That must be very hard." Alex shrugged, but his eyes told a different story. "I manage." Grace suddenly leaned forward, her small face very serious. "When did your mommy die?" "About 4 years ago," Alex said. "I was really little. I don't remember much." Harrison did the math quickly. 4 years ago, the same time Caroline died. A sad coincidence, nothing more. "Do you have anyone taking care of you?" Harrison asked. "Relatives. Foster care?" Alex shook his head. "I was in a home for a while, but it was bad. I ran away. I do better on my own." "You're just a little boy," Harrison said gently. "You shouldn't have to be on your own." "I'm not little," Alex said with wounded pride. "I'm 8. I can take care of myself." Grace reached across the table and took Alex's hand. The gesture was so natural, so innocent, that both Harrison and Alex froze. "You shouldn't be alone," Grace said. "Nobody should be alone." Something in the boy's expression cracked just for a moment. A flash of vulnerability before his walls went back up. They talked more. Harrison learned that Alex slept in shelters when he could, avoided the dangerous parts of the city, and survived by being smart and careful. He'd taught himself to read from newspapers and old books he found. He was clearly intelligent, clearly resourceful, but no child should have to live this way. As they prepared to leave, Harrison made a decision. "Alex, I'd like to help you. Really help you. Can I get you connected with some good social services? People who can find you a safe place to stay?" Alex looked skeptical. "I've heard that before." "I know, but I promise I'll follow through. I'll make sure personally." As Alex considered this, Grace did something unexpected. She climbed down from her chair, walked to Alex, and studied his face intently. Then she turned to Harrison, her expression suddenly urgent. "Daddy," she said, her voice trembling, "look at his eyes." Harrison looked. Dark eyes, intelligent, guarded. His breath caught. The shape of those eyes. The way the boy held his head. That stubborn set to his jaw. It couldn't be. But Grace wasn't finished. She pointed at a small birthmark on Alex's neck, just below his ear. "Daddy, you have that mark." "I've seen it." Harrison's hands began to shake. He did have that birthmark. It was genetic distinctive. His father had it, and his grandfather. "Grace, that's not—" Harrison started, but his voice failed him. Grace looked between Harrison and Alex, then made her announcement with the absolute certainty of a child who knows a truth adults won't see. "Daddy, that's my brother." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Harrison stared at the boy, really seeing him now. The eyes were Caroline's eyes. The stubborn jaw was Harrison's jaw. "The birthmark. When is your birthday?" Harrison asked, his voice barely a whisper. "April 17th, Alex said, confused by the sudden tension. Harrison felt the world tilt. Caroline had died giving birth on April 17th, but she'd only delivered one baby. Grace. The doctors had said so. One baby born healthy. One mother lost. "What was your mother's name?" Harrison asked, knowing somehow what the answer would be. "Caroline Webb," Alex said. "Why?" Harrison collapsed to his knees on the restaurant floor, tears streaming down his face. Oh my God, it was impossible. But it was true. Somehow, impossibly, this boy was his son. The story emerged slowly over the following days. Harrison hired investigators who uncovered the truth. Caroline had given birth to twins. In the chaos of her medical emergency, the second baby, Alex, had been mixed up with another infant in the hospital. He'd been given to a single mother who'd given birth the same day, while that woman's baby was mistakenly listed as deceased. That mother, struggling and overwhelmed, had died when Alex was 4. The boy had ended up in the foster system under her name, not Caroline's. No one had known to look for him. He'd been lost in the cracks of bureaucracy, until a little girl recognized her brother. The reunion was gradual. Harrison didn't rush, knowing Alex needed time to trust, to heal, to accept that this wasn't another false promise. They did DNA testing to confirm what Harrison already knew in his heart. Alex was his son, Grace never doubted. From that first moment, she claimed Alex as her brother, and her certainty became his anchor. Slowly, Alex moved into their home. Slowly, he began to believe it was real. Slowly, the walls came down, and the boy who'd survived by himself began to let himself be loved. One night, 6 months later, Alex came to Harrison's study. "Why didn't you look for me?" It was the question Harrison had been dreading, the guilt he carried every day. "I didn't know," Harrison said simply. "I thought I'd lost your mother and had one precious daughter. If I'd known you existed, I would have torn the world apart to find you." "I was so angry," Alex admitted. "For so long, wondering why my father never came for me." "I'm here now," Harrison said. "I can't give you back the years we lost, but I can promise you every day from now on. If you'll let me. Alex nodded slowly, then said the words Harrison had been waiting to hear. Okay, Dad. Years later, when people asked Grace how she'd known, she'd just smile and say, I could see it. He was my brother. I just knew. And maybe that's how it works sometimes. Maybe love recognizes love, even when logic says it's impossible. Maybe children see truths adults miss because they haven't learned to doubt their hearts yet. Harrison never stopped being grateful for his daughter's certainty that day on the street. She'd seen what he couldn't, not just a boy in need, but family, lost and finally found. Because sometimes miracles do happen. Sometimes the impossible becomes real. And sometimes all it takes is one small voice saying what no one else can see. That's my brother. And everything changes forever.